Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Monday Musings, Danny Sports Wrap, and it comes the day after Mother's Day, and I hope yours was great, however you celebrated it in a different way this year, a year that we will remember for a long, long time, and hopefully it will just be a year that we will remember for a long, long time, not an era. I, of course, gathered with a small group via Zoom. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I'm sure you had some way to make it a great day on Mother's Day, and I hope it was for you. As far as sports is concerned, as we wind into another week, we seem to be getting some perceived optimism, whether it's generating an ability to do things a little bit too soon might seem to be the case, but we are, in fact, seeing actual plans put in place, dates certain that are being set, events starting to take place like UFC over the weekend. The Bundesliga Soccer League in Germany is slated to start this weekend. England today gave the clear for the Premier League to play on June 1st. Baseball has a plan. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And, of course, Sundays right now means many, many millions gathering around their television to watch The Last Dance. And I'll have to admit, and I'll explore that I have got a little Last Dance fatigue. I tend to watch it now because everybody else does, and I'm supposed to talk about it. And also, some of the things that have gone on, Korean baseball, UFC, I have found that perhaps anything that has to do with sports that's live doesn't necessarily have to gravitate toward my interest. You figure you're so desperate for anything, you're watching, like I watched the first NASCAR virtual race. I haven't watched one since. Things like that. I think at one point everybody thought, well, any kind of sports people will be dying to watch. Well, maybe we're finding out that that's not necessarily the case, and we want the sports that we sunk our teeth into before this. So lots of things on the plate, to say the least, between baseball and a day that had historical ringing for me yesterday, a Mother's Day a long time ago, and some parallels to what has gone on in this community. Lots of different things to explore as we continue 2 months into our stay-at-home days, and maybe those stay-at-home days are starting to ease a bit. Be safe, be well, and join me next. We're here with Joe Spiker, the CEO and president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you had a great year in 2019, a record year. 2020 comes, things are moving smoothly along, and then the coronavirus comes. But your company seemed to be very ready, very proactive, and very ready to serve your customers well.
Yeah, we adopted social distancing very early before the cities even put out the notices, and we started working from home. We are largely cloud-based as a company, so that transition was easy. Our technicians are wearing masks and gloves, and salespeople are not meeting with homeowners. We're doing everything digitally and doing everything we can to do our part to get over this as quickly as possible.
So for any needs that people have right now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can always call us, 913-257-5426, but the best way is to go to eastonroofing.com. Put your information in and we'll give you a call.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters.
For many people, a family law case will be one of the most difficult experiences in their life. The law firm of Kenneth McRae will help you through it. Personal and effective help from Ken in concert with you will develop a unique strategy for your unique case. As Ken always says, divorce can be civil law, not civil war. Licensed in Kansas? Visit McRaeLawOffice.com or call 913-972-4765.
My friends at Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture are among the most accomplished and trusted clinics in the nation. Only one clinic has been rated in the top 5 in all 3 categories of chiropractic care, acupuncture, and rehabilitation, and that clinic is ASFCA. They have locations in Olathe, Overland Park, Prairie Village, Belton, and Lee Summit. Doctors Brad and Christina Woodle and their accomplished team of doctors and therapists will treat you like family, for the simplest of injuries to the most complicated conditions to avoid surgery. Whether you are seeking treatment for an injury or just looking to stay healthy and fit, this is the place for you. And it's been the place for me for almost 2 years now. I've been a strenuous daily exerciser for years, and as time goes on, that takes its toll. But regular appointments at Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture have helped keep me ticking on. And even as the years pile up, their regular care has allowed me to keep to my regimen and feel great. If you want to feel the same, give them a call or visit them at asfca.com/Danny. They accept all insurances and are open Monday through Saturday. And make sure to mention that Danny Clinkscale recommended Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back to Monday Musings, Danny Sports Wrap, and yesterday was indeed Mother's Day. It bounces around a little bit. It's on May 10th this time around. 50 years ago it was on May 10th, and there was a big event that happened 50 years ago on May 10th in my world that I'll talk about to conclude this particular program. But yesterday kind of reflected the times for me on a Mother's Day. My wife and I went for a long drive during the course of the afternoon. We each tend to try to get out of the house for a drive. I tend to do all of the errands in the family. My wife is very particular about being safe and does not like to go basically anywhere, but usually on the weekend we'll pack up in the car and try to find some rolling hills around Kansas, and we did so yesterday, driving out towards, a little bit of Missouri, too. Western Missouri, Leavenworth, areas like that. I think people from far away, and we're flyover country, but the people who consider us flyover country wouldn't consider this part of the world someplace that could be so green and rolling and beautiful. So that is something that we've done ever since the coronavirus has come to infect our lives, literally and figuratively so much. And then in the evening, my sister, my two daughters, my wife, and my mom settled in and watched each other on Zoom. And I would say that one of the, you try to find some things that actually have been positives during the coronavirus, and certainly the use of FaceTime and Zoom has got to be one of them. It was something that I didn't do basically at all before this happened, and now it's a way that I think people will perhaps use more and realize that they did it. And it's sort of the fallout of it was reflected last week on Friday. I did my Kansas City profiles, and it was with Don Fortune, the legendary broadcaster. And the genesis of that was the fact that Nate Piqued from WHB reached out to me, and it was Don Fortune's 80th birthday last week, and we did a Zoom call with a bunch of broadcasters and his family as well. And I would have never known it was Don's birthday, and I never would have probably reconnected with Don, at least in the short term, and we did, and we had a fascinating discussion and an incredibly well-received Kansas City profile. So you can glean some positives in situations like that, and maybe Zoom is one of them, or any derivation of Zoom that you like, and I think people will tend to do that a little bit. From a business standpoint, I think people are getting a little sick of it and doing all their meetings by Zoom. They want to sit down and be with people, but if you're in various parts of the country with your family, it's a great way to connect. And heck, we were on there for almost 90 minutes last night, and my mother mostly sat back and watched her children and grandchildren talk about things and laugh and tell stories, and it was really just a wonderful time. And as I said before, I hope that you found some way to make it a wonderful day on Mother's Day also. Mother's Day featured episodes 7 and 8 of The Last Dance, and I'll admit it, and I guess I'm probably against the grain here. I've got Last Dance fatigue. If it wasn't for the fact that I do this, I don't think I would have watched episodes 7 and 8, and they probably are among the most well done of the entire one. But I think that what it is to me is that there's this reaction like we're learning something here. I know what I learned last night. Nothing. I learned nothing new. Did I learn a couple details that Michael Jordan and Steve Kerr got in a fight? Yeah, I think I knew that anyway. But are we surprised that a teammate would finally have enough of Michael Jordan and throw a punch at him, and Jordan would respond, and then they'd patch things up and move on? No, it's not surprising in any way, shape, or form. And there's nothing revealing right now about this. Are the details interesting, I guess, to people who feel like they didn't know these things or are very, very much completely consumed by Michael Jordan? Obviously people are that way. But for me, it's been about enough. And I think probably the greatest thing, the wisest thing they did, when I first heard that they were going to space these out 2 at a time, 2 per week, I was like, oh, really? I figured they just roll them out in one stretch. Well, I think that was the smartest thing to do, because I think if you watch these over and over again, day after day, say they put 2 on a night for 5 nights, I don't think that would have worked as well. I think you would have gotten to this point, and more people than me would have been just tired of it. So I guess for the purposes of this, I'll watch 9 and 10 and see the conclusion and see more of Michael Jordan and see a production that clearly is tailored not to make Michael Jordan just look great, because he's very forthright about the fact that he was so incredibly driven, but some of the things that, the gambling and his father's death and the reasons behind him leaving the sport of basketball seemingly are kind of glossed over a bit. I think that you can't really have the narrative of this series be so completely what a absolutely overtly, incredibly driven basketball player that Michael Jordan was, and then sort of just say, well, he just took a couple years off because he felt like it, or he got fed up with all the attention, or whatever. That doesn't; those two things don't mix. That this guy at the height of his powers would just walk away from basketball for a couple of years just because supposedly his father wanted him to play baseball. That doesn't ring that true to me. But I guess that was one thing that maybe I learned, or at least was revealed to me a little bit. But on the whole, a very well-constructed and done documentary that I think probably could have been very well done in 2 or 3 hours. Not 10 hours, but most people can't get enough of it, and I've maybe had enough of it. And I also found out over the weekend that, and longer than that not just any sport will do. I've never been a UFC fan. I sort of draw the line of my ability to take the violence and such at boxing, and even that was a stretch for me, but the sport of boxing obviously has been wildly superseded by UFC, but UFC rolled out a live program, No Fans, in Jacksonville, Florida, very well viewed, no doubt, and I didn't watch it. I didn't watch any of it. I saw some of the highlights the next day. I had no interest in watching it because I had no interest in watching it before. I didn't watch the UFC before, and even though it was the only game in town this time around, I didn't watch it this time around either. And maybe that is unusual for some people. Maybe the fact that we've gone so long into this and done so many retread type of things that we just are, looking forward to the sports that we enjoyed, the sports that we consumed with great interest. And just because something is live and it's athletic doesn't necessarily mean, at least for me in this case, that I was going to go run to it and try something completely new. I didn't. And for instance, I also have not watched a Korean League baseball game. They're on every day now, and I see the highlights, but I haven't sat down and watched a game. And I like baseball, but I wouldn't have watched a Korean League baseball game before, so I guess I'm not watching them now. Now, if it was on at the exact time where I worked out or something like that, I guess maybe I would. They show them again in the afternoon on repeat. I wouldn't have known what happened. But just any baseball game, just apparently, in my world, just doesn't do it for me, and I'm looking forward to baseball coming back, and we'll delve into their plan in part 2 of Monday Musings, Danny Sports Wrap, coming up after the break. The sense of slight optimism, I guess, is what we see right now in the world of sports, because things are in fits and starts starting to, at least to be planned to open up. And as I just said, we saw an actual sporting event with no fans, UFC. This morning during my workout, I was actually watching a live tennis match, or live tennis matches, actually, that were played with no fans, and it was lower level professional tennis, but it was professional tennis. And boy, the atmosphere was stark and dull, and these were not high-level players, and so I, again, didn't really watch that much of it. I watched a little bit. I watched some to see the dynamics of it. The players were calling their own lines for the most part, and they obviously had no ball boys and things like that. So just to soak up the sort of atmosphere around it, I watched a little bit of it, but it did bring home to me that when we watch events coming up, even with things that we're very interested in, a Royals game, an NBA game potentially down the line. Watching them without fans is going to be really different, really different. The atmosphere was absolutely, positively stark in watching that particular tennis match. We've got more to come on Monday Musings, Danny's Sports Wrap, and I think there's some interesting things to talk about, including Major League Baseball, maybe planting their flag in the ground and trying to get baseball rolling with an intriguing plan. And there's a couple other notes and one real personal story that somehow has interesting parallels to Kansas City that you might not see. All that coming up as we continue Monday Musings, Danny's Sports Wrap, right here on a Monday.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
We're visiting with Larry Marshall, former Chiefs defensive back and punt returner, and now a Chiefs ambassador. Larry is a former pro football player with the aches and pains that come with that, and moving on in age as we all are. What do the Canaway CBD products do for you?
It's been a great relief for me. Being a punt and kickoff returner, collisions were a mainstay of my career, and these Canaway products, the salve especially, has really helped me try to get through every day with the aches and pains that I've had over a career of 7+ years in the NFL.
I get similar benefits as well, particularly with my back. Certainly wasn't a football player. What's the best way for our listeners to get more information about the great products themselves?
Well, I'm so enthused about it, Dana. They just contacted me at larrymarshall.canaway.com, and I can give them all the information they need to help them get through the day as well.
Start gaining all the benefits that Larry and I do from the trusted and reliable line of Canaway products. As Larry said, visit larrymarshall.canaway.com and get information on all the great products from Canaway.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Llewellyn from 23rd Street Brewery, wishing you well while you stay safe during this time of uncertainty. Due to the recent news, you won't be able to get the same in-restaurant experience at the 23rd Street Brewery that you've come to expect over the past 16 years. But you can get the same delicious items prepared with the highest level of staff cleanliness available for carryout and delivery through our partners Eat Street. You can also still enjoy our craft beers and crowlers for to-go service. So remember, stay safe, and together we will all get through this time of uncertainty.
Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Vision's goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. We roll on this Monday, and Major League Baseball today will hold a conference call with their owners, and they will present a plan, at least a reported plan, to the owners, and if approved, they're going to take it to the Players Association this week with the goal of perhaps beginning spring training in June and maybe the season in early July. Here's the way it lays out. Basically, the report's been in a couple of areas, but I'll read this one from The Athletic. A regular season beginning in early July and consisting of approximately 80 games. The number might not be exactly 80. 78 and 82 are also possibilities. Schedule would be regionalized. Teams would face opponents only from their own division and the same geographic division in the opposite league. For instance, the Royals in the American League Central would play their American League Central opponents and National League Central opponents. 78-game schedule might look like this: 4 3-game series against each division opponent and 2 3-game series against each non-league opponent. And teams would open in as many home parks as possible. Obviously, that seems to be a bit of a stretch in some of the areas. Toronto also might open by then, though non-essential travel between the United States and Canada is still restricted through at least May 21st. And right now, all travelers to Canada have to go through a mandatory 14-day quarantine. Now, obviously, that could end in time for that. And there is a secondary plan. The teams that are unable to open in their cities would temporarily relocate either to their spring training sites or major league parks in other parts of the country. The same would apply to Spring Training 2.0 if the league decides to use mostly home parks as opposed to returning to Florida and Arizona. And also, it's reported that potentially they're going to have expanded playoffs, maybe from 5 per league to 7 per league, with one team getting a bye and the other 6 playing short series to create the 4 teams that would move on. And there's a few things at play here, but certainly one of them is whether the players will agree in some fashion to being paid less. I mean, they're going to play a smaller schedule. They also are going to play games, at least for a while, probably a long while, in front of no fans. That's a significant bit of economic engine for the game of baseball, particularly baseball, probably more than any other of the 4 major sports, except maybe hockey, where basketball and the NFL are so driven by television, and television contracts are really the fuel for it. But baseball gate receipts are a more important figure than in some other sports. But that's going to be another stumbling block. And, of course, any setbacks that we have as far as health are concerned are potential roadblocks, too. I think there's a couple of things at play here. It would be exciting to know that you're basically having a stretch. You know, it's going to be a stretch run right from the start if you're playing 78 games. I think it would benefit teams like the Royals, potentially anyway, who aren't particularly expected to be great. And, you know, if you go out and start 8-5 or something like that, or even better than that, you're a sixth of the way into the season, and maybe you're in first place. And there's more excitement that there would be if you were 8-5 in a 162-game season. Also, they're going to have more players around, upwards of 50 players available, because they're going to play more games. They're probably going to play more doubleheaders. There's health concerns, which seems to indicate that they're going to play through people testing positive. That already seems to be the case in German soccer, where 10 to 12 players have tested positive, but it has not put the brakes on them continuing to start to play. So that will be at play too. So we should start to hear details this week, because today's supposed to be a conference call. If they approve, and you would think they would at this point in time, the owners, the players tomorrow would be presented with it. Now, that's a little more dicey, as whether they would just say, oh yeah, sure, we accept making pennies on the dollar to go play baseball because we want to. That seems like it might be a more lengthy process, and then we move on to potentially having this put in play. So we do see a preferred blueprint in place for baseball right now. That's an encouraging sign. Whether it will be carried out, whether any of these things will be able to be carried out, we'll have to wait and see, because there's things to be carried out as far as the Premier League in England. They have gotten the approval of the government as of today to start play on June 1st. Whether they'll use that June 1st date or not probably seems a little bit of a stretch right now, because it's only a couple of weeks away. And in these circumstances, too, you just hear people say things that are way off the mark and way too optimistic. The president of La Liga, the Spanish league, said there is zero danger in playing games on a daily basis. Well, that's just absurd, and it's another indication of what we see way too often these days, just in the world in general, not just the sports world, where people just say things that make no sense at all and just act as if they can actually be true. And, of course, there's danger to playing games. There's an international pandemic. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's zero danger is certainly a ridiculous phrase to use. Well, yesterday was May 10th, obviously, and on May 10th, 50 years ago, in my little world, there was an incredibly significant event, one that I'm sure if you're a sports fan of any kind, you've at least seen the visual of the Boston Bruins' Bobby Orr flying through the air after scoring the game-winning goal in the Stanley Cup Finals and winning the Stanley Cup for the first time in ages for the Boston Bruins. And that particular flying goal photograph, framed and autographed, as you see in the social media we put out today. It's not the one I have on my wall, but I have one on my wall. It was a gift from my wife many years ago, and it's in our hallway downstairs. And that was an incredible day in the Boston area. And what I was thinking about when I thought about it yesterday was, first of all, hell, it was 50 years ago. My goodness, that'll make you feel old. I was very, very young at the time, but still not very, very young, very young. So anyway, young enough to know what I was doing and to pay attention and to be a fan. But It was a very, very hot day in Boston that day. I remember exactly where I was. I was at my best friend's house. We were watching the game, but we're kids. We're, headed into our teenage years, and what do we do between periods? We go out and throw a football, to throw a baseball around, and that we did, and we barely made it back inside to see the goal that would win the Stanley Cup, because it came in under a minute into the overtime and provided the game-winning sweep for the Boston Bruins. They hadn't won the Stanley Cup since the war years. And it struck me that this was, if you want to get a sense for what that was like as a fan, all you have to do is think to right now in Kansas City, because Kansas City just won their Super Bowl for the first time in 50 years. They did it led by the greatest player in the sport, in most people's estimation right now, Patrick Mahomes, who was in his early 20s. The Boston Bruins won their Stanley Cup, led by the greatest player in their sport, who was 22 years old at the time, and he won the championship for the first time to a starving fan base. And he, Bobby Orr, was every bit, if not more, the same impactful athlete in the Boston area that Patrick Mahomes is now. He wasn't everywhere in billboards and stuff like that, but he was just as famous, just as revered, just as much of a rock star, and just as omnipresent in people's thoughts. And number 4 jerseys were everywhere, and now number 15 jerseys are everywhere, and it's expected to usher in a great era. The Bruins, because Bobby Orr got hurt a lot in his career and early on, won one more Stanley Cup, and certainly I hope that parallel doesn't rear its ugly head as far as it was concerned, but it did make me think of that attitude, that pervasive fame and uplifting nature of one player and one team and what it can do for a community. And of course, we came precious close to not having that happen, as it was only a couple of weeks before we all were shut down and leagues were shut down, and basically missed by a month of having that not come to Kansas City. But Bobby Orr is probably the greatest athlete that I have watched play, in my estimation. I know a lot of people consider Wayne Gretzky the greatest hockey player of this generation, but I don't think it's almost possible to explain the Ruthian impact that Bobby Orr had on his sport. And just as Patrick Mahomes and his no-look passes and things like that have made the position of quarterback completely different, Bobby Orr won a scoring title as a defenseman in hockey, something that nobody would have thought it would have occurred. But if you'd said that 5 years before, people would have looked at you like you were just absolutely insane. If somebody got 50 points as a defenseman, it was an incredible total, and he got 126 to win a scoring title, something that had been never done. And Patrick Mahomes is doing things that have been never done. So yesterday, as I thought about that hot day 50 years ago, and when I was a boy in Framingham, Massachusetts, I thought about the parallels to what Kansas City has in Patrick Mahomes, a young superstar who has just won his first championship and looks to win many, many more in the future. That'll do it for today's edition of Monday Musings, Danny Sports Wrap. I think you saw the usual mix of me being optimistic and fun in some cases, and maybe in the other case being more of a contrarian, especially about the Michael Jordan thing. But I will watch 9 and 10. I will be back next Monday for this one, and I will be back several times this week for all the good stuff we do here at DannyKlingscale.com and the Reasonably Irreverent podcast. It was a great Mother's Day weekend, traffic-wise, for the site. I appreciate that, and thank you for that, and look forward to entertaining you often on this platform and many others.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Klingscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new. This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like the law offices of Kenneth McRae, developing a unique strategy for your family law case. Divorce can be civil law, not civil war.